Okay, hi, everybody. Um, so for offer practice this week, what I put into the chat is a little bit of a different approach to our offer practice scenario. But what I wanted to do was first kind of get a temperature check from everybody. So we actually have a few folks online, as you can see, and then we also have Ben and Jordan are here in the room too, because they were already in the office. So they just crashed my party of one here in conference room 3. But first, what I wanted to do is ask, is anybody actively working with buyers where you guys are about ready to write an offer?
Getting there.
Getting there. Okay. What about folks online? Okay, cool. How about, are there any sections of the offer to purchase that people are really struggling with or that we should spend a little bit of time on? Because what I wasn't really planning on doing is going through the offer itself and starting to plug things in live. What I'd rather do is have you guys, and we'll go through these different scenarios. I'd rather have you guys look at this, choose a scenario that you want to practice on, and then send me your practice. And I can still help you. We can still use this time, but hold on, I just want to make sure. Not yet, not yet. Okay, cool. We can still use this time to address any questions, but I'd rather see, it's better if you guys start to actually do the offer yourself and start thinking about it on your own versus always watching me go through it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. So, but what we still have here is, I'm just gonna shoot our scenario. I've picked a property that's in Mequon, and I typically pick these properties in Mequon for a very specific reason. They have wells and septics. And for people that are not as familiar with those types of properties, there is that additional addendum that as a buyer, you might want to fill out because it has some testing contingencies to it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on our thing here. And here's our listing. So we're all going to write on the same property, but you will have the opportunity to write as a different type of buyer. But before we get to that, let's just go through this. So this is in delayed. Can anybody tell me when showings though will actually begin on this property? Tomorrow, yep, the 17th. So here we've got it right here, July 17th. So, and if you've got buyers that say, hey, Kim, I'd really like to get in this property beforehand, they can't, right? Like it's showings for everyone begin on July 17th. So we've got a 3-bed, 1.5 bathroom house, 2.5 car garage. I'm just shy of 1,900 square feet. They're asking 465,000. Taxes are here from 2023. They were 30, we'll just say $3,400. And we're on just shy of an acre. In terms of some additional things regarding this house, so here we've got all of our dimensions. That's exciting. Here are some additional details with regards to the type of home. It's a ranch, the type of exterior, if there's a basement. Here are the documents that they've got included within MLS. And even though a listing contract is shown here, you as the buyer's agent don't see the listing contract, right? The listing contract is confidential, but the listing agent must upload that to every MLS listing. So they've got a seller condition report, a lead paint disclosure, and some seller updates, which we'll take a peek at. Here are the inclusions that they're offering. So a lot of the mechanicals, plus the washer and dryer. And you'll notice here too, they say the water softener's owned. So that's important because sometimes they can be rented. And if it's rented, that doesn't come with the home. Can somebody tell me if, okay, so we know that this is in Mequon, but what type is Mequon a city, a village, a town? What are we in here municipality wise?
City?
City. Yep, city. So that comes in handy and you need to know that right away at the beginning of the offer where you have to say if it's in the city of Mequon, the town of Cedarburg, the village of Menominee Falls. And then here's where they indicate that there's a sewer and a well. Now for buyers, again, there's some additional testing that you can do specifically for private sanitary systems as well as private wells. As a buyer's agent, you know, that is, I always recommend that buyers have those types of tests done. In a competitive market, and we can talk about it in a second, typically in a competitive market, or what's been happening more recently, is the buyers picking up the cost for those types of tests. In a more normal balanced market, that's actually usually covered by the seller, but we'll get to that in a second. So here's our lovely marketing description. It's talking about how gorgeous this is. That's great. Peaceful views year round. Oh my gosh, it's a private oasis that also boasts a large cedar sided storage shed for hobbies and extra storage. Okay. Private remarks. Yeah, private remarks, square footage not verified. Again, they're indicating that there's a list of seller updates, which we can take a peek at. If there was any specific instructions, perhaps around where earnest money should be delivered to, maybe it's with a title company, that usually would be in private remarks. Sometimes too, the listing agent will put what the seller preference is for closing dates or binding acceptance turnaround times. So because we don't know a lot here in private remarks, if your buyer is interested in writing, which they will be, because that's why we're here, we're practicing. We are going to be giving the listing agent a call to try to get some of that information so we can ensure that if we do write an offer, that our offer is in alignment with what the seller's preferences might be. Included in the house, oven range, fridge, dishwasher, disposal, microwave, washer, dryer, water softener, again, that's owned. And then they also added here that there's a pet containment system, so like probably an invisible fence-like system, inquire for details. TV mount in the living room can be included if the buyer wishes, but the TVs are not included. So let's quickly talk about this pet safe pet containment system. So as a friendly reminder, and we can, you know what, I'm just gonna open up the offer to purchase now. There is a definition, a list of definitions in the offer as to what a fixture is. And it's typically on page 1. Can you guys still see my zip forms? Are you seeing that on Zoom?
I'm not on
Oh,
Zoom.
you're not on Zoom. Zoom
Yep.
people, can you see my zip form?
Yep.
Okay, cool. We're gonna do a new offer to purchase. Offer. Residential, we're gonna be buying, not listing, so residential offer packet. I never do, no.
These are things.
Okay.
Just send the.
Okay, so I'm just gonna really quickly go into documents. If you've selected the correct template within zip forms, your then documents, blank copies of the document should automatically be added. No, residential. So the template I chose was residential global residential offer, okay? But what I wanted to point out, because we were talking about fixtures, again, if you ever have any questions about about the offer or about the document itself, 99.9% of the answers are already in the document. So here in page 1, we're talking about what are fixtures. And I was talking about the pet containment system, this pet safe or pet smart thing. So I think in here, it even talks about it, in-ground pet containment systems. It's included as a fixture. However, what's typically not included are the collars that
Hmm.
the pet would wear. So we know if I go back to MLS, the listing agent has said the pet containment system is an inclusion, but inquire for details. So I would be calling, if your buyer does in fact want the pet containment system, I would be calling John, the listing agent, and just asking and confirming, does that also include collars? Like, what does that include? Because the more specificity you can provide in your offer, the more detail, the better. So there's a very little gray area. In terms of exclusions, this is pretty common, right? Seller's personal property is not included within the price, so it's excluded. And then they're offering, in terms of buyer agent commission, 2.4%. So overall, this is a pretty straightforward listing, and I'm just gonna take a quick peek at the documents. Again, they've included a lead paint acknowledgement. And somebody tell me what year the house has to be built before, 1978, the year of our Lord and my birthday. And then let's take a quick peek at the seller condition report. So whenever I look at this, the first thing I do is really try to draw my eye to anything that's checked off in the yes column. Okay, so here we go. Uh-oh, are you aware of any defects in the structure on the property? And they've checked yes, so this seller is a good seller, and he puts down here, B8, small cracks in the south dining room exterior storm window, and one of the west-facing exterior storm windows in the sunroom. Okay, so we got some cracked windows, not terrible. If you can, look at the condition report before you go see the house, even better, because then you can take special note of these things when you're there in person.
Can I ask
And
a
then they're
question?
also talking about major foundation repairs were completed in 2018, including the excavation of an east wall, partial excavation of the north wall, with no issues observed since. So this to me tells me that there's maybe some beams in the basement. They've had some work done. As a buyer's agent, what I would do is ask the listing agent if there was a transferable warranty on that work that was done in 2018 that would come to the new buyer or to the new owner of the home, right? So a lot of times like basement work, it might come with a 20-year transferable warranty, which that's great because then that transfers over to your client if they're the buyer, and then they can assume that warranty the remainder of the duration of the term. Let's see, they also checked the box here. Are you aware of defects in the mechanical equipment? And he said, yes, electric baseboard meter or baseboard heater on west wall is non-functional. So it sounds like you have a baseboard that's not working. And then are you aware of any basement window or plumbing leaks? They said no, which is kind of interesting because they talked about it earlier, but we're just gonna quickly go through. And we don't see any other yeses. Other than there's internet.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
The 1978 year that you mentioned, is that for the lead? Is that where you have
Correct.
to, you don't need to test for it if it was built before that year?
Correct. So I'm gonna go back to the MLS description. So yes, 1978, if a dwelling was built prior to 1978, the seller is required to disclose addendum S, which is the lead paint addendum, indicating that there might be evidence of lead paint still in the home. If
Okay.
it was built after 1978, there is no lead paint addendum that needs to be included with the listing. You can tell or you can find out how old the building is on MLS because it'll indicate the estimated year built. So this one was 1962.
Okay. Okay.
Yep,
And then
so good question.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, 'cause I'm still, new to all this, but the 2.4%, you said that they agreed upon that percentage, like for the buyer, the commission. Is that?
Yeah, so here, yep.
or-
So up until August like 15th or 17th, MLS is still allowed to include what the seller is offering the buyer's agent as it pertains to commission. So in this listing, they are offering 2.4% to the buyer's agent. After August 17th, we are no longer able to put any type of commission information into MLS.
Oh, okay. But will that still be the percentage, or how does that work?
So I think we're still working out details, but at the end of the day, the first thing you could do was call the listing agent and ask, is your seller offering any commission to the buyer's agent? And hopefully they would tell you. There might be some additional resources that we as Keller Williams and maybe even other brokerages are going to be putting together that summarizes like all of our listings and what the sellers are willing to offer, but more details to come as to how this type of information will be promoted and can legally be promoted after August 17th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to our offer scenario. So this is the document that I put into the chat, and I'll send this as an email to everybody too after this, so you have the PDF. But I've just reiterated what the address is and then the inclusions that were listed in the description. But here's what we're working with. After you called John Molitor, who is our listing agent on this, you've asked, hey, John, my buyers are really interested in writing an offer on this property. Can you tell me if there's anything that the seller is looking for as it pertains to closing dates or binding acceptance? Like how long do they need? Do they need post-closing occupancy? Do they have to stay? So after you've had that conversation, John tells you that the sellers are preferring a quick closing. They want as few contingencies as possible, and they want to net as much money as possible. Shocking, right? Like who doesn't? And that is the type of information that you should be going back then to your buyer clients and start discussing, because that can help guide you in various directions as to how you're going to craft and write your offer. So this is pretty common, right? Like people want to close fast, usually, because they want to get their money as fast as possible. They want to get a lot of money and they don't want to have any contingencies. They want it to be easy breezy. But as I always say, well, you know what? I'd like a pony. And sometimes you don't get everything that you want. And I really don't want a pony, but I just like saying that. Okay, so here's where we're going to do things a little bit differently. We kind of start doing this in Accelerator, but I think I've stopped doing that the last couple of times. I've given you 3 different types of buyers that I legitimately think could be competition on this property. So buyer group number A, their names are super and duper motivated. They've lost out on 8 other offers. Some of this looks familiar. They don't mind a project. They're willing to take on some risk. They have a flexible closing time frame, and they've been pre-approved for up to $480,000. In addition, they have a few dollars that they can use for an appraisal gap or inspection coverage. They're looking for you on guidance as to what you recommend. Okay. Then buyer B is Nancy Newby, not related to Jonathan Newby, but this is a newbie. Just started looking, perfect location, pre-approved for up to 475 with her no adult dad, who's a lender at a big bank. Then the third type of buyer is potentially a cash buyer. So this guy's name is Cash Money. He's a flipper. You have history with him because you've helped him over the last 3 deals. You also know he can be a lot to handle. This actually comes in, this isn't too off, out of reality here, but a lot of cash buyers think because they are cash, they're automatically gonna win because they're cash, they can probably close faster. But that's not always the case because a finance buyer might come in at a higher amount of money. And although it might take a couple more weeks to get the transaction together, the seller could be losing out on money, could be losing money or leaving money on the table
Mhm.
if they went with a lower cash offer. I'm not saying every cash offer is always lower, but I'm just saying like, I have buyers who they're cash and they think because they're cash, they're always gonna win it. And they have quickly realized just because they are cash, they still have to compete when it comes to value and price. But this guy, he really doesn't care what's happening. It's his way or the highway. So this is probably gonna be a buyer that's gonna be more so telling you what he wants to do versus potentially getting some insight in your recommendations and advice. So what I want folks to do is to choose one of these buyer types. And I want you to create an offer using them as the buyer and some of this background information. And I want you to use that to put together in your offer. Now, what we can do is we can start going through this. We can maybe take one and start going through it and start drafting the offer. But what I want to do is, and we've got a few folks in the room that are very good at sending me their completed offer packets. I want you to pretend that I am John, the listing agent, and I want you to send me your completed practice offer via email by 9 a.m. tomorrow. And I will take a look at it and I will review it and I will provide feedback. And this is like, in terms of time frame, this is pretty realistic in terms of, say you go see a house on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock and you find out there's other offers on the table, your buyer might have to submit an offer by the following morning in order for it to get reviewed. This actually just happened last night. I have a listing where we had a offer that was received on Monday afternoon, yesterday afternoon. Another buyer asked to come in and see the property. We said yes, but we have an offer on the table and we have to get back to them by tonight. That buyer number 2 came in at 4 o'clock for a showing and they had the offer to us by 8 o'clock that night. So it's fast. Does this make sense in terms of like the instructions, like what I'm hoping for you guys to do?
Mhm.
Yes.
Do you want us to like break out, do it, come back in a little bit?
Or you can
More
email it
questions?
to me. Yep. So when it comes to, if you're choosing buyers A or buyer B, who's getting financing, I'll leave it up to you to tell me like what the down payment's gonna be. That can be arbitrary. But what I want you to do is just tell me, okay, they're a 20% down buyer, so then I can check your math. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
In terms of interest rate, I'll leave it up to you guys for the finance buyers to tell me what interest rate you guys are gonna be working with. But if you go the cash money route and you want to write this offer as a cash buyer, you don't have to worry about financing. But is there any section of the offer that you guys want me to specifically go through, or perhaps even like addendum A, which goes and talks about the well and septic test? Do you want to do that?
Sure.
Does that sound like a plan, folks? Cool. Okay, so if your buyers want to have the well and septic tested, and I would say for this practice, you're gonna do it. You can find that type of information in those testing contingencies in addendum A in the offer to purchase.
So when we're in the offer to purchase, we just go back or hit the back option?
Make sure you save it. Yep, save it back
Save
and then
it.
open up. Yep. Mhm. So this addendum A is actually a nice complement to the main offer document because it has some additional items that might be important to your buyers. But then it also covers a couple of other things too, as it pertains to like HOA fees or home warranty. So I will just kind of go through this quickly. Addendum A, if the seller was giving closing cost credits or some type of credit, you would use this document to indicate such. If the seller was offering a home warranty program, or if your buyer would like the seller to purchase a home warranty, it's a contingency, you would check this box. So that indicates that a plan would be included effective starting the date of closing, and it's for a year. You would need to understand if, say, the seller was offering a home warranty plan, you would ask the listing agent, what is the cost that the seller is willing to invest? And you would put that amount of money here. If you, the buyer, are asking the seller to pay for a home warranty program, you'll need to do a little bit of due diligence and research to understand what the budget would be for the home warranty program that you want them to buy. And then this section also includes how the cost will be paid. Who will pay for it? Is it the seller or the buyer? And if neither is crossed out, it automatically defaults to seller. And then it also asks you to indicate who is going to order the warranty. Is it going to be the listing agent or the buyer's agent? And if neither is indicated, the listing firm is the default. So for our practice today, if you want to add this in, great. But we know that at this point, the seller is not offering this to the buyer as an option. So I'd probably just, for our practice tape, maybe leave it blank. If there was some type of an association fee, so if this was a condominium where there's dues, monthly HOA fees, or, you know, there are even some subdivisions that have association fees to cover things like retention ponds or common area lawn maintenance, you would know that there is some type of HOA fee because it would be indicated in the condition report. The seller would have to lag that, and you guys can probably hear my stomach. I'm very hungry. If there is some type of HOA fee, it actually would also be listed in some of the details within MLS. Now, the next section, it's kind of broken up into a variety of things, but does everyone know the difference between an inspection and a test?
Tests need to be sent out to
Yes,
checked,
they
correct?
a test takes something off of the property. So if you were getting a soil test, if you were getting asbestos tested, if you were getting pool water tested, a test removes something from the house and you'll get it analyzed. An inspection is only a visible inspection or review of what's going on with the property. So, say, and I'm just giving a hypothetical, you don't have to include this in your practice, but say when you went through the home and you noticed, there was what appeared to be some type of mold or microbial bacteria growth in the basement, and your buyers really want to have that tested, you would use this contingency or use this document and specify, check the box, and we want to have mold tested. But for our practice, what I want you guys to include is the well water, and the private sanitary system test. Why? Because these have their own private well. Oh, actually, and it's on municipal sewer. So just kidding, you only have to have the well tested.
So just the
Easy.
water,
Mhm.
or not the well system.
You're gonna do both. So there's two sections here, the well water. So this is determining, they're gonna open up the well and they're gonna do a test to determine if there's any bacteria, and they've kind of listed things here. Any lead, any copper, what have you. This is also where you indicate who is going to be responsible for paying for it and who is going to have the right to cure. So similar to like a home inspection. So for our practice today, we're going to have the well water tested. And something that's a little bit different about the contingencies in addendum A, specifically the well water and septic or private sanitary system. Typically, deadlines in an offer begin at the binding acceptance date and they move forward. But for these contingencies in addendum A, they actually work backwards from closing. Why? I don't know. But let's make it fun. So
Kim, is
let's
that
just read this
for-
section.
Sorry, is that
Good.
for all things in addendum A, they move backwards, or is it just the well?
It's not all things. Good question. And we'll go through it. It's the well water, the well system, and the sanitary system.
Okay,
That's why too, like just becoming familiar with these documents can help you in more ways than you would ever know. So for the well water, I'm just gonna read it. If there's an active well serving the property, this offer is contingent upon the buyer receiving no later than blank days prior to closing, before closing. A written report that's dated no earlier than 60 days prior to the date set for closing from a state certified or other independent qualified lab, blah, blah, blah. So what this means is a report cannot be older than 60 days before closing. So we need to have a recent relevant report. But we also know too that that buyer is asking for the report to be sent to them no later than blank days before closing. 15 days is the standard, is the blank. That's pretty common. Okay. Now, this is where we also have to indicate who's responsible for getting the reports. So you have to strike one, buyer or seller. If you don't strike one, the seller is the automatic default. So I'm gonna just tell you, for your practice today, we're gonna have the buyer get the report and the seller is gonna have the right to cure. So I'm gonna read it as if I was writing the offer as such. So the buyer shall be responsible for obtaining the reports, including all costs, and agrees to promptly provide copies of all reports received to the other party. So this means the buyer is going to get the reports, they're going to pay for the reports, and they agree that they're going to give the report to the seller promptly. All water samples used for testing shall be taken by a licensed plumber or other qualified inspector or an independent third party. The seller shall or shall not have the right to cure. The automatic default, if neither one is crossed off, is seller shall have the right to cure. Okay? Everyone following? Well, since we had the well tested, that means they had to actually open, or the well water tested, that means they had to actually open up the well. So these typically, these contingencies kind of go hand in hand. So if you check the box to also have the well system tested, it follows a similar kind of format. It can't be, it has to be delivered no later than blank days prior to closing. And the report can't be older than the 60 days prior to closing. Okay. And then same thing here. Who's going to cover the costs? For our purpose, for our practice, we're going to have the buyer cover the cost. And then you have to indicate whether or not the seller shall or shall not have the right to cure. Now, interesting here, if the well is inspected, the well water contingency is automatically selected and added to the offer. So these go hand in hand. Like if you're testing the well, it's automatically going to also include the well water. But it's best practice to check that box in line 31. So then you can also indicate dates and deadlines and who's covering the costs and who is going to cover the cure. Make sense? Okay, cool. Now, Private sanitary system. We don't have to deal with this because our listing is actually on municipal sewer, meaning it's on city sewer. But if the property had a mound system, a septic system, or a holding tank, this section also follows the same format as the well. So it works from the date before closing in terms of deadline. It can't be a report that's older than 60 days. And then you also have to indicate who's going to obtain the report, who's going to pay for it, and then who shall have the right to cure.
Is there a standard? Do you typically have the buyer pay for that kind of stuff these days?
Right now, in this market, in order to make a contingency more attractive to a seller, the buyer is paying for the cost and obtaining the reports and sending it to the seller. A few years ago, it was very common for the seller to do this. But right now, you are seeing more offers. Now, this could change as the market slows down. This could start changing and going back to the buyers will ask the seller to pay for all this stuff. But then the right to cure follows kind of the same approach that you would follow for the home inspection. Are you going to give the seller the right to cure or not?
Okay, thanks.
Now, speaking of right to cure, like this actually goes into detail too as to what that means. So I'm not going to read through it line by line, but it again kind of talks about the steps taken and what it means for someone to have the right to cure. Another time that you might use this document too is if your buyer was getting a VA loan. So you would have to specify that in the offer to purchase, but you would also, bless you, specify it here in addendum A. So it's talking about the VA mortgage, who's going to pay the funding fee. And typically a VA mortgage comes with a termite inspection. How neat. And people think that there aren't termites in Wisconsin, and there are. But no. And then also for our practice, you are going to be checking box 203 because we are also including that lead-based paint addendum that the buyer will have to indicate whether or not they're going to have a lead paint inspection or not. And then the buyer and you, the buyer's agent, have to sign that.
Kim, I was gonna ask with the up top there, the addendum section, addendum topic. If it's any one of those lead-based occupancy, what do you put there? Or rental property?
Oh, okay. So if you're giving, good question. And this kind of just comes with knowledge of the documents that you have at your disposal. But if you were giving the seller post-closing occupancy, or if you were asking for occupancy as a buyer before closing, you would check this box and the addendum O is post-closing occupancy. If this was a rental property and you wanted to be very specific with how the rental terms and conditions of the existing leases are going to be carried over to the next person, you would check that box. And I believe the rental property addendum is addendum R. If you go into, and I'm going to just hit back, if you go into zip forms, some of these addendums are already included within your template, your offer packet. But actually, here we go. Addendum O, here's the occupancy one. Let's just pull it up. So this is where you would indicate if you're giving them post-closing occupancy, if you need closing or you need occupancy before closing, you talk about who's going to pay. It's kind of like rent. Who's going to cover the security deposit? There's property taxes. Who covers those? We have contract training on YouTube that has specifically gone through addendum O and how you should fill it out. But if you're like, okay, I need to use I need to use addendum R. Like, if this is a rental property, how do I get to addendum R? So I'm gonna do a quick look to see if addendum R is here. I don't see it. So then I'm gonna click on this button over here in the top right called All Forms, and I'm gonna put rental. Addendum R. Now it's gonna add it to my zip forms. And usually it adds it to the very bottom. So there you go. And we also have a contract training on how to fill this out. So if you are looking for a template in zip forms and you don't see it, just go to this all forms button again in the top right and just put in a couple of keyword searches. Like yesterday I was looking for multiple counter offer. So here it is. And then it'll just add it. Any other questions? I'm gonna go back to this. Does this make sense in terms of what I'm asking you guys to do? So pick a buyer. Let's pretend you're in competition. You've got one other buyer that you're in competition with. So let's think about how that would look from contingency perspective, pricing,
Best and what's the term you guys always say?
highest and best. Mhm. This came up yesterday, so this condo listing, we had these two offers, and buyer number two that got their offer in quite quickly. They said, is this a highest and best situation? Like, said, yes, it is, because we have a deadline that we really want to meet.
And that's kind of reading between the lines, it's just like, just
We don't have
don't
time.
mess around, we're not gonna negotiate, or if it's, no, not really, it'd be like, okay, we can negotiate and try and bid each other up and do
Yeah.
more. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
Nice.
Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I will send this document as well as I'll send the listing information from MLS in the event you might not have MLS access. I'll email this to everybody. And then as you are filling out your offer, and if you have questions, by all means, like, please let me know. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see again who's on. And then, when you send over your offer packet, for people that have gone through Accelerator, you know that we teach you to send it through with a cover letter, right? Which is basically like key points or key headlines from the offer. I strongly encourage you to do that. Yesterday, I had the tale of two cities. I had one agent that literally just said, here's our great offer. And then I had another agent that summarized all the key headlines, which was like so helpful.
What would you choose?
Here's our great offer. For a few reasons. But it pained me not to
You
accept
did.
that other offer.
you
So I was like,
did.
oh no, they didn't do the cover letter. But again, I think a few of you have done enough of these practice things that I feel like we're starting to take the training wheels off a little bit. And I know you guys can do this, but if you have questions, ask me. Pretend I'm your listing agent partner, your co-broke, and I'm happy to have those conversations with you. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Are you nervous? You shouldn't be. You're gonna do great, everyone.
I'm nervous, but I'm gonna try.
Okay, April, you got it.
Thank you.
I have full faith in you. Okay, I will send everybody an email with this information, but please let me know if you've got questions. Best of luck to you and your buyers.